This production is brought to you by the University of Edinburgh.
Hello, and welcome to an interactive introduction to MATLAB. This screencast will look at using the while loop in MATLAB. A while loop is another way to repeat commands in MATLAB. The difference between the for loop and the while loop is that the for loop is generally used when you know the number of repetitions you want to make, whereas the while loop is used when you want to repeat the command until a certain condition becomes false. We will look at a couple of simple examples to explain how this works. In the first, we will repeat one of the examples we used for the for loop screencast, but using the while loop. The second example is a slightly more involved illustration. Firstly, we create a new script file and move on to compute the first 3 powers of 5. As usual, we also add the comments at the top of the page before we start the main script. We now define our while loop. After the while loop, we will define a condition, and while it is true, the body of the loop is executed. When it becomes false, the loop will stop. So we will define the variable k, and we will say while k is less than 3, it will complete the command in the body of the loop. The body of the loop is simply going to take the first 3 powers and assign them to a vector. We use our loop counter k to assign them to a vector, and the calculation is then simply 5 raised to the power k. Once again, we leave the semicolon off the end of the line so we can see what happens when the loop executes. We also need to set k equal to 0 at the beginning of the loop. We then need to increment k within our loop. If we didn't do this, the command would iterate indefinitely. As usual, we type end to end the loop. Finally, we shall save and run our script. You can see that when we try to run this script, it returns with an error. This is because we have defined k as equal to 0 outside the loop. When we run the script, the command tries to assign a 0 element to my power, which doesn't exist. To rectify this, we move the increment line above our power calculation. This now means that as the calculation enters the loop, k will equal 1. Running this again, we get the vector values of the first 3 powers of 5, which is what we would expect. In the second example, we will look at analyzing a series of scores which are held in a row vector. We will use the while loop to scan through the elements in the scores vector and count the values which are greater than 90. Firstly, we will define both the variable k and the count number equal to 0. We define our while loop and the variable k to be less than 4, i.e. the number of elements in the scores vector. Then add the counter increment. Now the doing section of our loop has to analyze whether the score is greater than 90. To do that, we use an if statement. So, if scores k is greater than 90, then we define an element count and add one. We then end the if statement and end the while loop. To display the number of instances of values higher than 90, we add the disp command and the number to string command, which will alter the number to a string. We will now save and run our loop. the scores are printed and the number 2 is displayed, which relates to the count of numbers higher than 90.
This production is copyright the University of Edinburgh.